She's in New York and will join us as soon as she can. Let's see, I'm going to share and show you to start today's session on. Okay. All right. Today's session is Get Clear. The second part of Get Clear is how. How does the organization work? And we will cover some interesting material on that today. But before we get going, let's look at the feedback from the survey for session 2. Some great feedback, good responses. We got most everybody responded. Pretty high marks in general. Not quite as tight as we'd like, but we're getting there. And some of the key themes that were brought up in multiple entries were, one was the lean in to adopt a chosen role. We talked specifically about in interactions with each other, are you jumping into a default role or consciously managing yourself to be who you need to be as effective as you'd like to be in that interaction? And people found that quite interesting. So that makes me think maybe we should do that a little bit more from time to time. So as you're in groups and interacting, monitor yourselves, see others, take note, and we will try to create time after exercises to talk a little bit about that. It gets to be quite interesting. Another key and common theme was that WWWs are important, hard, doable, and take effort, but worth doing. And we'll come back to another point on that in a minute. Another key common theme was keep it simple. Use common words of one syllable that are easy to understand, and that iteration to alignment is really the path to success. I have paired input and responses. You saw, I think, 3 different responses from me on points raised in the feedback and after in various conversations and iterations on email. I hope you got a chance to read those and found them useful. Some of the key points from all of that are summarized here. One key question is, why is it that WWWs are so darn important? And the simple answer is that it's proven to be far easier for an organization to reach its potential to perform and grow when the leaders are clear and aligned on one WWW, meaning there is one, because sometimes we actually work with organizations where there isn't one, and that's the problem. But sometimes we find there is one, but there's actually many. And so getting it down to one where everybody's clear about the same one, pulling in the same way, and this, towards the same WWW, turns out to be immensely liberating and frees up for better performance. One question was, how often do leaders revisit an evolving WWW? I mentioned that one that took 18 months, and that led to, like, well, how often do you look at it? And the answer is it was pretty much a standing opening agenda item for all interactions, executive team, management team, board meetings, even all hands. It was always top of the list of things we would review. And not that we would spend a ton of time on it every time, but it was always in our mind as a constantly evolving. And even when we finally did get to one that we ran with, when all parties were more or less in agreement on it, it continued to evolve. It's just that it reached a point of clarity and stabilization that we all felt so comfortable with. People have also commented on the interaction of participants in our sessions and suggested that we should call on people more and keep people so a little bit more on the edge of their seat and willing and interested and ready at any moment to participate. I kind of push back on that a little bit and say, look, if you want to just not jump in and participate actively in the live sessions, that's your choice. In a sense, you're taking the course virtually because you're not taking advantage of being in the live session. So it's your choice. My proposal to you all is, let's agree that if we're in a group session, or when we're in a group session, if you leave your video on, then you're saying to me, the instructor, it's okay to be called on. Not that I'll always call on any particular person or everybody, but at least I know that you're in the session with the idea of participating and are okay to be called on. How's that sound? Does that sound like it would work? Yeah? getting a few nods. Use the chat or go ahead and pipe in. Yeah, all right, I'm getting mostly nods here. Let's go with that then, unless anybody has an objection. And so you can leave your videos off if you don't want people to see what you're doing while we're talking. But when we go to group session and we do a little interaction, just flip it to open and then we'll know you're in the game. Another comment was, how do I keep up with so much new material coming at me in these sessions? Well, my suggestion is get what you can. We've tried to make it a consumable and efficient, but we know sometimes different people absorb information at different rates and need to think about things over and over. I'm like that myself. And that's why we do the recording, so that you can come back to it afterwards and look at things over and over again and maybe take it in at a little slower pace, and also work with each other on that in your teams. And feel free to interact with us afterwards or with each other. You have a way of getting at each other through the Moodle. If you want to just throw out a question to everybody or a particular person just to chew on something. But we have had good feedback on the recordings, both from the people who are taking the course exclusively by watching the videos and by people in the sessions who have gone back afterwards and caught up a little bit on some points that they might have missed or needed to have reinforced by going back and looking at them. So the quality is good, and the audio, the visual, and the transcript are all there to be worked with. So we'll encourage you to keep doing that. Question came up about where to look for assignments, and I apologize for this, but there clearly was a mess up in the this session by session detail of the session by session content. Let me pull that up so you can see what I'm talking about. We go here. In the Moodle, we had underneath the roadmap, there is a link to session by session readings and assignments. And some people are using this as the guideline for what to do for what session, and that's not a bad idea. Each session in the Moodle has that session's content, assignments, and so on, but it's also printed here. And they were out of sync because we did this at the beginning and then went through and did all the sessions and didn't completely go back and update this. But it is now updated and should be in sync. If you find inconsistencies, please get in touch. I had in mind that you would use what you see in the Moodle as the guiding force. Like if there's ever a question, the Moodle is the baseline. Follow what the Moodle says. But they now should be in sync. So for each session, we have session number, its name, what you're supposed to read, what you're supposed to do. And I've broken out as a separate track now where you roughly should be on your final project preparation. So the session work is like the learning track along the way. The final project column is like your case is the course track. And it's not rigorous and hard and fast in every case, but it gives a good idea of where I think you and your team should be in progressing towards having your final document for the briefing on session 10 and then for submission thereafter as we go through. So hopefully that'll add a lot of clarity. And go back and take a look at it. It's right where I showed you underneath the roadmap in the pre-work section. We've reposted an updated version. All right, back to here. Any other questions on that? Feel free to unmute and ask if you have one. And I will try to get my chat up there. Okay. More examples. It turns out a couple of people asked for more examples of good or completed WWWs. In general, the strategy is to post those in the appendix of the related session. So if you look at the appendix of the slides in the PDF for session 2, you'll see several more WWWs than we looked at in class. For today, there'll be some process charts that relate to examples of what we cover in terms of do, sell, grow. So you should generally find them there or in the book, or ask me if you want to see even more. But throughout the program, in fact, today we'll see several examples of real examples of WWWs and processes and other content related to what we cover. Good question on how do we work on alignment in our teams, because no matter what great content we have, if we can't work together in our teams in the program or outside of the program, how are we going to make any of this work? That's a great point. What I've found works is retaining outside help. So people who know how to help people get better at working together, hearing each other, listening to each other, communicating in powerful ways, working better together. You have coaches that can do that. There are classes you can take. There are books you can read. There are articles. There are workshops. IntelliVenU has 4 workshops where we teach those basic skills for one-on-one, managing yourself, managing one-on-one interactions, managing a team, and managing an organization. But one of the most powerful things you can do is simply talk about it with the group. So just create time in your agenda and work, not just in your business, but on your business. And just say, hey guys, let's just talk about how things are going. What's working, what's not, what do we want to be doing better? And not that you should take the entire meeting, every meeting on that, but maybe a few minutes up front on every meeting, and at the end, how did we do? I do that with the executive teams that I work with to say, what's working, what do we need to work on, how do we get better at this? So I highly suggest that follow any or all of those suggestions. And then let me know how it goes, and I'll be happy to give you more, give you some coaching along the way. One good question was, when do we start working on our organization? Well, the answer is go ahead and start. Have at it. There's a lot of work being done by many of you already on your WWWs. And I'm asking in the survey, it's the poll that's out right now, you to tell me how far along you are. Has everybody filled in the poll? We've got 8, 12. Few of you haven't quite filled out the poll yet. Go ahead and fill that out, and we'll give a readout on it in a minute. But as I was mentioning, several of you have given me evidence that you are making good progress in working with your teams and your organizations in general and your stakeholders writ large on your progress towards a consolidated WWW. Good work, congratulations, keep it up. One example has come in from Rise. Rise has been working on theirs, and I volunteered to share it with you and maybe and solicit your reaction to it and some feedback through the chat. So Jadra, if you're online, can you open up and take us through your WWW?
Hi. So I worked a little bit on this with Leela this week, and it looks like you don't have, I didn't quite manage to get you the most recent version, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
So the what, youth yoga led by yoga teachers with 200-hour certification or higher, as well as yoga for teens, teacher training certification and or equivalent experience. The who is for underserved Bay Area youth and the stakeholders in their success, and why is to create socially, emotionally, and physically healthy communities. And we had a little more added on to the why, which was to empower youth to become agents of peace and positive change in the world in order to create the socially, emotionally, and physically healthy communities.
So you inserted it as a preface to the point we already have.
Yeah, and we sort of condensed the what a little bit, but it's still under discussion.
So use the chat to comment on what you see here. Just take anything and just say something back to Jadra. Jadra, say something to make sure people understand you really do want their feedback.
I really do want your feedback.
Yeah, I mean, people are generally reluctant to share what they're really thinking unless they've been given permission by the person to whom they're speaking. So this is a chance.
Yeah, you should definitely speak honestly. It's only helpful if you're, I mean, constructive criticism is constructive. So it's only helpful if you're actually making the honest, open points.
Maybe it should be good to elaborate on the stakeholders and the who.
Yeah, define stakeholders.
What youth are you targeting? We talked about this last time, but you are benefiting underserved youth, but who is paying?
Oh, yeah.
stakeholders, right? Okay, great. I'm not sure what you mean by and or equivalence. Great. We're not going to work this any further with Jadra in this session. These comments are great. In general, we're recording these comments and we'll get them to you.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about writing them down, but that's great input. Thanks, everybody. And that's exactly the kind of feedback, input, reaction points that we want to get whenever you share a WWW. And I just wanted to make sure everybody knows I'm happy to look at your WWWs or anything else you come up with anytime along the way. Don't wait for any particular submission due date or anything. Just send it to me and I'll look at it and get right back to you if you've asked for comments. And I'm sure you'll be willing to do that for each other as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Good job, Jade. In session 3 today, we've got several key points that will cover and have a specific objectives. Every business, it turns out, does 3 things. It does what it does, it creates demand for what it does or sells, and it creates the capacity to do more selling and doing, which we call grow. One of those 3 systems, the system of doing, selling, and growing, one of those 3 systems most constrains performance and growth at any given point in time. It's important for leaders to be clear about which is the constraint and then to address that through change initiatives. We're also going to talk about the 5 basic operating models and what's the distinction between them to some extent today. We'll do more of that in the next section. But we'll get to cover the 5 and a little bit about each of them. And it's important also as a crescendo point for today to share with everyone not just who, what, why, but how your organization works and what each person in it fits into the big picture. And we'll talk about why that's important and how to go about addressing that. Our objective today is for you to be able to determine which operating model is your organization. Or if there's the hybrid, what is the hybrid? If it's completely different, how is it different from the 5? And we also want you to get to the point of being able to rough out a map of your organization's do, sell, and or grow process, whichever one constrains the performance and growth of your organization. And we're not really talking about PhD level process mapping here because you don't really need that to have a positive impact. You just need to be able to do something that you can share with others and get their input and work on together. And we just want to get you into the mode of doing that. And then to identify which of the 3 do, sell, growth systems most constrains your organization, because that would become a logical place to decide to make a change initiative, which will be the focus of the rest of the course. To do that, there's a good bit of content to get through today. So you can see a huge chunk here on the truth and associated actions, and then a nice chunk of time for you to work together in your teams and then across teams on the practice case that you might have gotten a chance to prepare for today. And then we'll get out of that mode and into, okay, how do you apply this to your own business and do the usual wrap up. So the point here is there'll be one breakout into your own team to work on the practice case, and then that and your team will then combine with another team. And hopefully Joyce will have joined us by then to help us orchestrate that. If she's not, bear with me as I try to do it on the fly. So, ready? Today's truth is that an organization exists to solve a problem for people, same as last time, but any action is to get clear. But our focus today is not on the WWW, but on how. How does an organization do that? Because the WWW doesn't tell us. And it's important to know. So look at the who, what, why, or the problem, market, solution graphic here. Dropping out of the what side, we get into the how. What we don't cover here, remember one of the principles of this program and Intelligent in general is we don't cover what's already well covered by others. So you can read Michael Porter and get into how the 5 market forces can best be worked with to get a better, cheaper, faster way of delivering your offering. You can read about innovative offerings and the SRI model for using proprietary knowledge or methodology. All of that's fantastic stuff. It's well documented and it's really important and it's really good. So we don't need to cover it. But if you're not better, cheaper, faster, or have some way to create an unfair advantage through intellectual property, knowledge, or method, maybe even data, then that's a problem, and you need to deal with it. But we're not going to help you with that. What we will help you with is how your organization does what it does in terms of these three things: do, sell, and grow. And if you think about it, anything an organization does falls into one of these three systems. And if it's whatever it's doing that is not either doing one of these or helping one of these to happen, or coaching it to happen, you got to wonder why you're doing it, it turns out. And it turns out also that every organization grows its do, sell, and grow systems more or less iteratively. You often find that the do is a little bit out farther in front. So we can do what we do, and boy, we would like to have more demand for what we do, so we will start working on the selling system and end up extending our ability to sell, which, yay, luckily, hopefully creates more demand for us to do. Now we're delivering more, but now we don't have enough capacity, so we have to work on the grow system and maybe hire more people or get more money to buy more goods that we can turn into the final product, whatever it is we're doing. And you basically then get to the point, okay, now we have more capacity and then we're deploying, so we need to work on the do system, we need to get selling again, and it just kind of iteratively keeps on going and going and going. So the question I have for you, because most people do tend to identify mostly with either the do, sell, or grow system, is which one do you identify with? Before I do that, I'll close the prior poll. And hopefully you can see that 4 people have finished the www, 5 are in process, 6 will get to it soon. And everybody's doing it as part of a group. Thank you for that. So I will get rid of that poll and launch the next poll. I can't remember how. Up share. Oh, here we go. Okay, let's have you say which system do, sell, or grow do you personally most identify with, and which system do you think most constrains your current or your organization's performance? Everybody in? Interesting. So that's it. Close the poll. Share results. Can everybody see? We have a good distribution. We have 6 people are do, 3 people are sell, 4 people are grow. Sounds like a couple people might not have filled it out. Then in terms of constraint, most people think it's sell, but some have a capacity to deliver problem, and some have a grow problem. One of the things we note is that if you have a doing problem, if you can't deliver on time, on target, in budget, if you can't deliver reliably, you have no other problems. That's your problem. Fix it. Because what's the point of selling and creating more demand if you can't even do what you've got? Once you've got that, then you've got to focus on selling. And that looks like most people might be in a situation like that. And if they get very good at that and create a lot of work to be done, but no capacity to do it, then they'll have to work on the growth systems. And it looks like a couple of people are in that case. All right. One of the, again, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because you could literally take a whole course just in the evolution of systems and process mapping and systems assessment. But what we want to do is get you familiar a little bit with all of that because it's helpful. And I don't want to get lost in it, but get a good sense for it. So the idea is that you can assess the maturity of your systems, or the system that most constrains your organization, by using a chart like this. So if you think about what is a system is a collection of resources working together to achieve a common goal. A collection of resources, people, things, data, working together to achieve a common goal. And the do, sell, and grow systems can be evaluated on a maturity continuum, just like any system can be. These criteria come from more or less the standards of system maturity assessment. CMMI, Carnegie Mellon Maturity Model, the Baldrige Award, ISO 9000 are examples of organizations and processes that have evolved to help organizations assess and develop the maturity of their systems, whatever the systems they're talking about. So here, the idea is take whichever system most constrains the organization, do, sell, or grow, and for that system, you can use this as a way to evaluate how mature that system is by, like, have you written it down? Have you written it down a little, a medium, a lot? So high, medium, low, it is defined. I've written it down, and we've got everybody on board with it. Is it predictable? Do you know what will happen at any given point? If you have a certain situation, can you predict what will happen next? If you can, then, you know, with certainty, high, sort of, medium, then not really, but somewhat low. Is it repeatable? Which means if you were to do if you did it once and you were to do it again, would it come out the same? And if you put the same situation in two different versions of the system, would they come out the same? That'd be another way to look at it. So in sequence or in parallel. Is it written down? Do you edit it and maintain it as you learn new things? Do you teach it? Have you taught it? And is it ever evolving as you learn new things? Do you have a systematic way of updating it? And then however you answer these, you can give evidence here. So you can say, yeah, there's a document or a series of documents over here. There's a schedule for teaching it. These were the changes we made last month, that sort of thing. So again, I don't want to get lost in this, but this is just a way to structure your assessment of thinking about your whatever system most constrains your organization, or any system, in fact.
Peter, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm working with a client that has a cell problem. They have lots of documentation of the process, but their practice is not very good. Would you say that that is instead a process that isn't really fully documented? Let's go back to your criteria. I'm looking at that. It is defined, it is documented, but I don't think it documents all the right things.
Meaning, well, is the system that they've documented working? Is it any good? Is that part of your point?
Yeah, they're having very low win rates, and so it's not working. Their cell isn't working. So is that not really as defined as like this criteria? On the surface, it looks defined and documented.
Well, it's just not. It's defined. It's just not any good, or not as good as it needs to be. So that's a good point. So, for example, if we had a do system and it was defined and all these things hit, and we had bad results, this doesn't catch that. If you notice, in fact, Baldrige Award winners can spend a ton of time, literally millions of dollars, doing all of this, winning the award, and still not be very good companies, because they are actually get overly interested in all the process and documentation, but not in the results. So this is not a surrogate for evaluating performance and doing things well. It's just simply a way of assessing the maturity of a system. The system could still be good or bad. Does that help?
Yeah, I feel like there's a criteria missing that evaluates performance somehow, because a system is irrelevant if it doesn't work.
Exactly, which would get us to here, right? So that's why I said if we're not able to deliver, that's our problem. Let's address that. If we are not selling, we got to figure out, well, we don't have the system yet. We haven't figured it out, right? So first we got to figure out how to sell. So if this is a little bit easier, if you already have the fundamentals worked out and it's working, this can document it so that you can scale. So this may be more of a way to look at it of the grow dimension.
Mm-hmm.
So whichever, I would say stay up here, whichever one of the three systems you feel like is constraining you, you don't have enough business, you don't have enough capacity, or you're not able to successfully complete your work. That's probably the first question. And then for that system, then start to attack it. Okay, go on. In the face of success, when an organization is performing, two problems tend to creep in almost immediately with increasing complexity, scope, and scale of operations. One is bureaucracy, one is stovepipes or silos. What happens in the bureaucracy dimension is that the people who started the company and used to be the ones that did it all, do, sell, and grow, get drawn away from the front line and are no longer actually doing, selling, or growing. They're kind of running the business, or you might even think administering the business. And the risk is they'll lose control over quality and the way things work. The risk is that they themselves will be so far removed from doing, selling, or growing that you wonder why they're there. And they become management bloat. This is one of the explanations for why you can sometimes end up with an excess of middle management that is not really needed. People get promoted and all of a sudden they become administrators as opposed to people continuing to constructively contribute the majority of their time to the essential elements of doing, selling, and growing the business that they're in. And then stovepipes and silos emerge because there's so much to do that it's crazy for everybody to focus on everything. So everybody focuses on less and less, and other people focus on the rest. So you end up with employees who are very good at one very small thing, but they lose touch with how that fits into the biggest picture, which also helps them lose touch with, wait a minute, what is this whole thing doing anymore? I don't really get it. And often when we do surveys asking employees what it is that's on their mind that they would like to have addressed by the top of the house, invariably they say, really, we need to reconnect with who we are and what we do. Who the heck are we and what are we doing? I know what I do, but I don't know what the whole does. And it can lead to not caring. So not knowing leads to not caring. So I do this and I don't, stuff comes in, I do my thing, stuff goes out, and I don't worry about it from there. So if things aren't going well, I don't even know, let alone care. And knowing the opposite leads to engagement. So when people know where the whole thing is going and how they fit in, they have a greater sense of engagement in the whole and concern, caring, and will be more responsible in the decisions they make and the actions they take that will benefit the whole towards knowing, doing what it's doing as well as it can possibly be done. So the suggestion of the solution to both of these is for leaders to do four things. Themselves stay active primarily and do, sell, or grow activity. And as people get promoted, make sure everybody knows the path to stardom at this organization is to continue to be mostly invested in your time of doing, selling, and growing. That's what keeps us going. Number two, build systems to do, sell, and grow, because you can no longer do it yourself and make sure it happens. You've got to build a system so that other people can do it as well, maybe not quite as well as you ever were able to do it, but they can do it in a way will be good enough. And then provide governance to monitor and guide what everybody's doing in these systems so that things go the way the organization leaders want it to go. We'll talk more about that in the governance section in a later session. And then in today's session, we're going to talk a bit about how you can design, communicate, and drive how the organization works so that everybody can see it and know what the whole is trying to do, what the parts are, where their part is, and how what they do in that part fits into other parts to form a line of sight, they call it, to how their individual work fits into the entire organization and how it works. So let's go back to, remember Tom's of Maine. We had the WWW, Natural Personal Hygiene Products for global consumers committed to a sustainable world, good prices, and quality products fitting their lifestyle. Well, that's nice, but how does it work? What it tells us what an organization does and for whom and why, but not how. And so that leaves us with the open question: how do we work? And again, remember, we're still in the getting ready to change segment of the program. So before we start to change anything, it would really be good to know how it works today. So we'll be much more aware of what we're doing and how what we're doing impacts the organization as a whole if we know that. Well, it turns out there are in 5 common operating models or way organizations work. And in each more or less defines a different kind of business. We have 5: the product, service, operation, channel, or exchange. And each of these is a completely different business. And it's easier for an organization to mature its systems if it conforms to one of the 5 basic models rather than a new one or a hybrid. If your organization does deviate from one of these 5, be sure you know why and that it makes sense and how, so that you can accommodate for it. And we'll go through each of these a little bit in the next chart. So a product organization, for example, could be you provide software, hardware, information, a thing. You can point to it, and you get paid for it per thing, per copy, per unit. Examples would be Hewlett-Packard provides printers and computers, Microsoft provides software, and so on. Service organizations are generally providing hourly or project consulting or service in exchange for payment per hour or per deliverable. So I have a competence that I deploy, you pay me for deploying it in your organization at this dollar rate per hour. Or you're paying me to deploy my services to produce a certain output, you pay me when you get the output. Organizations that do things like that are big consulting companies, for example, Deloitte, Pricewaterhouse, Booz Allen. An operation, an organization that runs something for you, like an outsourcing organization or facilities management. You pay people to come in and take over your computer center, for example, or you use their computer center. And there you would pay per unit of resource consumed or per unit of time that they spend doing it. CGI is a good example of a company that specializes in operating systems for others, as is EDS's outsourcing business. A channel would be to set up and administer the connection between buyer and seller. And the one who set up that channel would take a piece of what flows through it. And Amazon's a good example of that. We have many buyers, many sellers, and they coordinate the requests for the products and the products delivery and make all that nice and smooth. And they just take a little piece of everything that flows through. Then you have an exchange where you're brokering many providers and many buyers and many sellers. And in that model, you'll get a subscription fee for being part of the exchange, and then a transaction fee for running something through the exchange, which would be like a New York Stock Exchange or a taxi company or a ride-hailing company. Let's take an example. So this is a real example from early days that I was working with a company called Crane. I'm calling it Crane Co. It's slightly disguised. What they did was to locate, fix, resell secondhand cranes, as in the cranes you use to build a building. And their clients, their customers, were construction companies around the world. And why did the construction companies pay Crane Company to locate, fix, and resell secondhand cranes? Because they were particularly good at delivering quality cranes at a good price. So they had them, they could get them where they needed to be, they worked, and it was the best price. That's a lot of good reasons. So this is a nice little company. Then you say, okay, I get it. You know, we have a client, they're selling to construction companies, reliable, good crane at a good price, refurbished cranes. Remember, they didn't buy brand new cranes. They only did this with old cranes. But that doesn't tell us how it works. So let's look at it. So let's guess. Let's say, well, if it was a product company, how would it work? They would build or procure and refurbish cranes to sell. So they would take the cranes, inventory them, and then sell them. A service might be they don't actually own the crane, but they can assess, recommend, and service the crane. They might also own, maintain, and operate the cranes, and they rent out to the cranes and actually run it for you. Or they could connect crane buyers and crane sellers. Or they could be brokering crane seekers with crane owners who bid to buy and sell cranes. So it was certain, somebody has a crane, they want to sell it, they put it out on a exchange, and Crane Co. could let everybody who's interested in cranes know about it, and they could bid on it, and whoever had the best price would get the crane. So you see how one WWW can be 5 different kinds of business depending on what they choose. Now, how hard do you think it would be to do more than one of these? See, let's talk about it for a minute. What do you think about these, and which one would you choose and why?
Well, we're having a chat on this very topic, Peter.
Are you?
Yeah, because Melanie has a company that provides both software and services and wants to know if we should separate them for purposes of this exercise, but I don't see how you separate them. I mean, CGI has this problem. Jane and I lived with this problem for decades. Okay,
so I had this problem. I was at the early version of CGI with AMS, and we would often ask ourselves, are we a product company or are we a service company? And it wasn't until I left the company and ran a different software company that really was a product company that I learned what a real product company was. And what I learned was that when I was at AMS, what I was really doing was a product-driven services company. So we would sell the product, but it was really not just for the product revenue, but for the opportunity to provide services around the product. When you add CGI to it, you have one more additional follow-on, which is really the large one, which is to operate it forever. So you can be a product company that is really a front end to a services company, which is a front end to an operating company. And this is what I meant when I said back here, if your organization departs from one of the 5 basic models, be sure you know and understand how and why. Because it is possible to start out as one and to evolve to another, or to have one feed another. But you've got to look at it, think it through, and say, that's what I'm doing it consciously. And there's no right answer. Again, it's what you agree on. So this is to provide a framework for discussion and to reach agreement on, are we one of the 5, or are we a hybrid for a specific reason, or are one really leading the other? So we're really a services business, but it's our sales strategy is to start with a product.
And my experience, Peter, part of that, of getting it right, if you span multiple of those types of business, you really have to understand what the KPIs are for each Absolutely. Of the individual businesses.
Absolutely. The KPI meaning key performance indicators, and we'll get to that next time when we talk about the financial side a little bit. But yeah, each one is different. You have to be good at different things. The economics work differently. The things you watch to know how well you're doing are different. And we'll get to that in the next session. That's the how well part of our business. Right now, we're just focused on the how. But Gina, you're absolutely right. You've got to sort this out.
I will say to those of you who I've had the opportunity to use this slide once with one of my clients recently, and it worked extremely well. Their problem was they really weren't sure what business they were in, and they weren't being, to your point about being studied and saying, I know that I'm in this with a dash of this and it's all leading me to this. They just didn't know.
Right.
And it's really it's a helpful tool to say, okay, which one of these businesses are you primarily in? And is that the one you intend to be in, and focus on it and get rid of the others, or partner for the others, or do whatever, but at least understand what it is you're doing.
Right.
Yeah, but in this day and age, especially with software, I don't understand how you can just do, like Microsoft is probably one of the only companies that can possibly just do one. And even now it's getting into the cloud business, which would be operation.
Exactly.
So I have a lot of trouble with that.
Well, don't have trouble. It's just reality. It's the evolution in time. So what was IBM? It used to be a product company. I actually presented this at a conference where there was executives from IBM in the room listening. And at the end, they said, this is exactly right. Even we can't be in multiples of these. Even we, IBM, found it difficult to be both a product company and a service company. And So they have to pick. So EDS picks operations, IBM moves from product to service. It's just a way of navigating the course. And so your question might be, are there any product companies left today? Well, sure, a lot of hardware product companies. Are there any software product companies might be your real question. And there probably are. I mean, when you think about Salesforce and Oracle and Microsoft and Computer Associates, they all have software. And many of them are moving from product to operation because now they're running them as SaaS platforms, which are basically utilities where they run it for you. But they're not all there yet, and it's an evolution. And some offer the services around it, and some of them don't. There's a ton of companies evolving now around Salesforce to provide service on how to use Salesforce.
Right. That's the thing, is software is so complex now, how can you sell it without some service?
But Salesforce prefers to sell it and let the Price Waterhouses and the other companies in the world provide the service. So they're moving from product to operation, i.e. utility, and having other companies run the service. And when I was at Hyperion, that's what we did as well. Hyperion software was not the least bit interested in the services. It only did the services that it had to do. It was a product company. Today, Salesforce version of that would be it's an operating company. It uses the product to provide a special offering and allows other companies to thrive providing the service. And
Salesforce grew so much because of all those other services that grew around it.
Exactly. So, right. Once they sort of got it out there. Initially, you have to do it for the industry, but if your purpose is to become an operation, then you seed the ability to work with your offering and other companies let it thrive, and then it creates demand and you win. And overall here, my point is to look at a business as an architected system of doing, selling, and growing, but also in terms of its chemistry, its algebra, its WWW, which of the 5 models, what are the KPIs, what are the competencies it needs to be good at. All of that is discoverable and articulatable and manageable. And you're better off if you think about it that way. So in these first 5 sessions, what we're doing is focusing on how do you describe an organization in a rigorous way so we know what the heck we're starting with before we tinker with it. And this whole course is about leading change, but before we can lead change, we're going to spend 5 whole sessions on describing what we've got. And so this is part 3 of that.
So
so as we do this exercise for our own company, should we pick one of these? Because we have products, we have services, we've made a conscious decision to do both. Should we pick one of them for our presentation and focus on that?
I think you should pick whatever you should use this framework to describe what you think you are. And I will tell you right now, if you were to go ask your CFO, who I happen to know,
he has a very clear idea. Jump in you too, Peter.
There's no question that he's a product company. What are you? So you've got to either go with that or figure out something else to say, but you got to realize he's part of your stakeholder base.
All right.
So I have a question, I guess follow up to that. So these 5 things that you're talking about making a decision on, it really is around like taking it all the way through to the financials and thinking about how you sell things. It doesn't mean that you don't necessarily have other parts of these channels going on in your business.
Other parts of the other kinds of models going on, yes. It's just that you have to explain it. You might be doing one in service of the other, or you might be doing one and becoming another. So IBM started out as product, became service. AMS was a product-driven service company. CGI bought AMS so that it could take a product-driven service company and turn it into an operating company. So it doesn't mean you have to be one or the other, but you have to explain what you're doing relative to this framework. And there's some punchlines here. It's easier to do pure ones, and it's very hard to do multiples. And it's okay to go from one to another as long as you do it consciously and smartly. Let's take one other example that's interesting. Think about a bank. A bank might provide a way for people to get at their money. And they might do it by going into the branch, by mail, or by phone. And then along comes the internet, right? So there's new technology. Now, how would a bank that provides customer access to their money through phone, branch, or mail deal with the internet? Well, that's an example of an organization, a bank, needing to think about how it's going to do what with the internet in light of these 5 different ways of running a business. One is, what could happen is a company could emerge that sells software to banks to enable their customers to access their money via the internet. So that could be a software package that some company sells to the bank so it can now provide internet access to its customers. There could be an hourly service provided by a consulting company, say, to help banks develop their own internal front end. So rather than buying software, the banks would do it custom with the help of an outside service provider. Or an organization could evolve to provide an operating service, like a SaaS-based business, for the bank to tap into so that the customers would never know they were using a third party, but the third party was enabling the bank to now provide internet access to its customers. Or a company could evolve to connect banks to suppliers of internet front-end software and link them or provide an exchange to match any of several banks with any of several front-end internet providers based on needs, price, and availability. Again, the point is there's 5 different ways to set up a business into this nice, exciting situation. My only concern is if you would try to do multiple of them or go from one to the other or try to do something even different, it could be quite difficult compared to just picking one and doing it. And in fact, they're all probably good business. And which of these do you think actually happened? Which of these businesses came into being? Well, the answer is they all did. A company called S1 sold software to enable banks to get internet access to their customers. AMS provides service to do it. ORCC ran a service. Accenture was a channel, and an eLoan at the time was a broker. So anyway, the idea is that there's always play here, and you're advantaged by framing up what you're looking at, understanding it, and doing what you're doing smartly and thoughtfully. So let's get to the punchlines. It's good to organize your thinking around the operating model. And the operating model is a choice. You don't just default into it. It's best to think about it, and this is the one we want to be. We're going to do things to make it work really well. And how do you choose between them? Well, you choose based on what resources you have to work with, what kind of returns you're thinking of achieving. For example, a services business generally is harder to grow fast. Its multiples are lower, and the investment is much less, so it's safer, but doesn't return as much. Whereas a product company, you've got to often spend millions of dollars digging a pretty deep hole for exciting upside when you can sell it to hundreds or thousands or millions of people, but it's much more speculative. So it's higher return, but a lot riskier. So you have the trade-off between risk and return here. And probably most important of all is preferences. What do you want to do? What do you like doing? What are you good at doing? And if you take all these into account and realize these are all, you can work with them all. Like you can get more resources or different resources. Find others to work with who have a higher appetite for risk. But again, think about it in these terms you're picking.
Could I ask something?
Yeah.
Where does market come into this? Like, don't you have to identify something that people actually want? When do you analyze that?
Well, I think that would be the target returns. Like if you want to be a $30 million company or a $3 billion company, could be completely different. So a nice tight niche market that's only so big, you could get away with a smaller one framing. But so it's not, you have to think about it, but I think about it in the context of what we're going to spend and what we're going to get. And then note it's a big deal to change or evolve models. It can be done. It's done all the time. It's best done if you do it consciously and thoughtfully. And it's hard to succeed with a hybrid or a portfolio. I mentioned that one business last week where we had one small company, a 25 person company with 11 WWWs and several different operating models as well, all trying to be a hybrid. So when you say, how's your business doing? They say, well, which part of our business are you talking about? And that's just not an acceptable answer at any stage. Okay, so we'll pick up a little bit more on that when we get to the how well next week. So we'll come back to what you have to be good at and what you watch to know how well you're doing and how the economics work next week. But you can see perhaps from all of this how it's important to spend time thinking about how the organization works and to communicate that and to sort it out at the top of the house and then communicate it broadly. So, and I can have evidence of that is when I've gone into organizations, I almost always start by asking the employees to answer a survey about what's on their mind, what do they think needs to be dealt with in the organization, just so I can tap into that. And I'm almost always, the top two items are, we want to know more about who we are and what we do, and they want to know more about where what they do fits in. And if they don't have the answers to those two questions, what happens? They tend to tune out, don't care, don't be engaged. So answering those two questions and communicating the answer powerfully leads to engagement and better performance. Again, you might ask, why is this so important? If you think about it at the top, if you have even small differences in the perception or understanding of how things are supposed to be working and what we're trying to do, those differences magnify because people in the organization pick up on them and amplify them in what they think and do, and it goes on and on throughout the organization. And very quickly, if there's any depth to the organization, you can get real problems. And the leader's choice in that is to ignore it and don't worry about it. Or assume that everything's okay, or see that there needs to be clarity and then just mandate it, or as we suggest, make it an explicit conversation among the top of the house and iterate to achieve the clarity in unified thinking that leads to high performance. This all leads me to suggest that a really good way to proceed from knowing all of this is to develop a picture, a diagram, to use as a tool to help clarify across the top of the house and then to communicate broadly what the organization does and how it does it. So what I'd like to do is spend the rest of the time today talking about how to do that and giving you a chance to do that, and hopefully you can begin to experience why it's so useful. So one student I work with, I think it was a consumer products company. I'm not sure if it was Tom's Domain, but it was something in that realm. And she came up with a picture that I'll use here to dramatize this. But step one is identify all of the organization processes in the inside and outside entities. So what is it that this organization deals with and what deals with them? So all its piece parts. So the organization has a product. It has customer service and logistics and demand servicing units that can move that product around and take care of it and know where it is. It has people who manage the product and brand management, consumer engagement, who's using the product, what are they experiencing, what do they want in it they don't have. Of course, you've got people running IT and the building maintenance and facilities. You've got competitors. You've got the customer themselves, which customer development. So how do you take customers and make them better customers or bigger? How do we predict what customers are going to need in the future? So all of these are different parts of the business. And you lay them all out. You just throw them all out there. And then what you do is you string them together. So here are all my entities, all the parts of the company doing something. Here are the things we deal with. And here are the outside forces, and you put them together in a picture that you can share with each other and then broadly that shows how all these piece parts fit. So here's that customer development demand forecaster that's monitoring customer activity and saying who's using what, how fast we're running out of what, and therefore how much should we order going forward. And that would drive fulfillment and demand, and then what new products should we have to meet future demand, where you have to be looking at what can we do now, what are competitors doing. And so basically she just drew a picture like this and then showed the support functions. These are not the do, sell, grow, but you can't run the business without them. So you need to do as much of these as you need to do in order to do all of this, but you don't want to make your business all about HR or accounting or infrastructure because that would drive up costs for no particular value. So you do as little of these as you need to support all of this. And I'm going to give you an example of when I did this, when I came into Softco, which is the slightly changed name of CompuSearch, who of course is represented in our class, but at a much later stage. So this is back in 2005 when I first started working with the company in the role of CEO, and the Carlyle company bought CompuSearch. And this is the www that took us 18 months to come up with or to stabilize. At the time, it's moved on from this, and I've also made some tweaks, so it's not exactly the real case from back there. But the way we came up, when we describe what we do, is we provided enterprise software, so software that runs throughout an organization, a very large, complex organization, a government agency. We provided that software and services related to that software to automate the business rules and processes that were mandated by the Federal Acquisition Regulations, so the rules for buying and selling and moving money around. We did it for public sector organizations that had the authority to spend, grant, or move public money. And the reason those organizations would hire CompuSearch to do all of this was because when they did, it improved performance greatly, it improved productivity, it improved the control over what was going on, and the transparency to make it so you could see what was going on. It's a very hard job to follow all the rules in government, and CompuSearch has a very good way of helping organizations in government do that. So that was a WW, and while all this was evolving over those 18 months, somewhere in all of there, we also did the survey that was to ask people what was on their minds, what they wanted us to deal with, and two of the top questions were, who are we, what do we do, which is one of the reasons we were working on the WWW. But the other is, where does what I do fit into the whole? So this is the method that I used, and like I showed you with the WWW, the method for working with a team to come up with an iteration of the WWW. Here's a methodology that works to come up with a process chart for the organization that shows how the whole works or how any of its systems work. What I did in that case was sit down and interview each member of the leadership team and ask what each of them did. And then work with them each to rough out a process flow chart, and then iterated with each of the leaders on a way to show what they did and how it related to what the other leaders did. And then I asked each functional leader to brief the other functional leaders on their piece of it and to upgrade their chart based on feedback from that briefing. And then working towards improved clarity, and also to get them to own what they were coming up with, and to make sure everybody was seeing and saying the same thing. Then what we had each do was present to all hands a 30-minute presentation of their area, but in the context of the whole over a series of all hands. So we didn't do these all at once, but each leader presented the whole and then their piece in detail. Next time, next leader presents the whole and their piece in detail. And we had all that filmed so that not only did we benefit of them preparing for that and benefit of them presenting and the interactions and clarity that works that followed that, but also in case we had people coming into the organization later, we could recreate that experience for new people by having them get to see the filmed versions. And what that led to was an integrating picture that is at the highest level this. So this might look simple, and it is, but it was enlightening and helpful even for the top of the house at the time, and it added clarity for everybody in the organization to be able to see themselves on this chart and where they fit in. So here's our suite of products that were developed by the product developers. We had product managers who were in charge of making sure they knew where we were in developing the product against the roadmap of evolution that was affected by what could be done because technology was evolving and what others were doing that would provide a competitive impulse for us to meet and beat them at what they're doing using technology in new ways. Then we would take the offering, and our sales and marketing folks would package information about this offering suite and present it to the market. We would host and support the software for those who used our services to run the system for them. Then we had professionals who provided services to help those in the market that wanted to use the service in their own way to tailor it and operate it themselves. And then we had a training group that trained users. And our clients were in three broad markets: our civilian, which is now run by Greg, who's in his team, or in our session here today. And then there was a group in defense and a group in intelligence. And then we had, a COO, a CEO, and then a finance and HR, infrastructure, facilities, IT, all around supporting it. Very simple picture, tells a nice little story. I know some of you have already begun working on your versions of this. And Jadra, I think, who you heard at WWW from earlier, RISE has also been working on how RISE works in terms of the offering that they provide and the funding for it. And Jadra, if you're still on, do you want to pop back in and take us through this?
Yeah. So it seems a little bit less arrows than the one before. Maybe it's nice. But we have our organization, and then the different ways that we get funding from not school sites over on the right, which would be the individual donors, like grants and foundations, and business partners. Would business partners be schools?
No,
Oh.
there would be non-schools that just want to support all of RISE.
Oh, okay. So, and then we have all the different ways that we interact with the schools on the left side. So some schools are not able to afford to pay anything for the classes that we provide. So RISE pays for all of it, which means the stuff on the right pays for it. Or other schools can pay for some, but not all. So it's a combination of the school funds and the stuff on the right. And then other schools can actually pay the whole on their own. So they'll have nothing from the right, but be able to just completely fund from whatever sources they have at the school. And then lastly, a school might have a particular grant or donation on their end that can help pay for our service for our class.
And that can come into the school to RISE or go directly to RISE for a school.
Right. Okay, so yeah, there's two different ways to do that one. Yeah.
And where are you with this?
Well, we're kind of trying to figure out which is the most sustainable in terms of these different variations. We have a little bit of all of them right now. We really like when schools don't have to pay because then we can get into the schools that may want it the most or need it the most. I don't want to say need it the most because it's just everyone that will. There's different variations of how to benefit from it, from a yoga class, but yeah, so we're kind of working through and researching which of these works best and which we can keep going with.
I think up till recently, most of the attention was on raising money to fund operations, was on the green stuff on the right. And I think what RISE has begun to realize is there's a lot of different ways of helping the schools come up with the money on its own, or or not just on its own, but for its own use in its own area. And that's an area that's a little bit underdeveloped, but starting to show some promise. One thing is really realizing is you can't do all of this. So you have to make some choices. You have to try some things, see what works. If it works, you do more of it. If it doesn't, go on to something else. Comments and questions on that? If you want to just throw it into your chat, fine. If you want to raise one now, feel free. Let's see, let's go to group. Hello, everybody. Brian,
So-
what do you make of it?
I was just wondering, so far, which model have you been most successful with?
For Rise?
Yes.
Jada, do you have a comment?
Sure. I think our most, in fact, and you maybe would guess this, is that it does help to have the school at least pay some so that they're a little bit more invested in what we're bringing. But there is, or either pay some or offer something in exchange. So there's one school that doesn't pay any money, but they help us out with our fundraiser every year. And they're our oldest school, and they've been so good at keeping in touch. And we have a good connection with their PE teacher, and it's just like really, really well organized now at this point. So I guess it would be the being able to pay for some, at least in some way, but maybe not all or none.
And where do you guys usually go for fundraising? And the reason I ask, because I would think that places where, schools can't afford to pay for something, places that are heavy in the community are probably places that are like churches. They're also probably nonprofit, and then also food banks and other things like that that you might be able to team with. Is that possible?
Wait, you're asking where we go to get funds on like the right side?
Correct, yeah.
So we have a lot of small individual donors. We've done a number of small, medium-sized fundraising campaigns, which have been a big source of income. And we also have a couple of different grants. We haven't worked, to my knowledge, with anything like a food bank or a particular church, although some of our yoga teachers that help us out with our like fundraising campaigns tend to be like either like little local kind of celebrity teachers or work in a space that are also more nonprofit oriented. Like we have one of our teachers that helps us with the fundraising, who does the class at Grace Cathedral that has just a whole bunch of people that come every week. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
Let me interject.
Yeah.
In a way, we're beginning to have the kind of discussion that we would like to have in session 10 when you do your briefing. So we're starting to model that a little bit here for you all, not just you, Jada, but the reactions and questions that people are asking of the kind we'd expect to see there. And you're welcome to do more of this between now and then with each other. You can even do it offline. And there will be an opportunity during one of the future sessions to do this exact thing for your organization with another group of you along the way. This is how you prepare. In this particular case, I want to just kind of hold it here because I don't want to go all in because it takes the rest of the session. We still wouldn't be anywhere near done. But in general, Rise has been living over here in the green area, but meagerly. It would be nice if somebody would just dump $10 million in and it'd be done and we'd be fine. That's not going to happen, and the money they are getting by grants comes and goes. It doesn't stick around forever. So they've got to find a way over here to become self-sustainable and scalable. And one of the thoughts is that people who have a stake in the local communities where these under-resourced kids are living would actually benefit from funding a program like this because it would raise better kids better communities, who make better communities, who make good customers, who make a good town. And that's the thing they're experimenting with, is working with local commercial enterprises and other stakeholders. So wealthy citizens who care about their community, providers of people who sell cars or gas or clothing in the area who would care. And that's an interesting area, but it hasn't been one they've been doing much with so far, but there's a little bit of evidence, and looking at what others do, you can see how that could possibly be good. So let's close that. Go ahead.
We have a couple of small things that happen every week, like this teacher or that teacher runs a donation class every week, and then that funds comes in a little bit every week. Right.
We need to do it on a larger scale. So if anybody here wants to make a donation, feel free.
Right.
All right. So let's go now to our practice case. If you've got some time to prepare before today's session by looking at the practice case for the bank example and come up with a first cut at a process chart, that's great. What we'd like you to do now is to split out into your teams. And I see that Joyce is back on. It's probably arranged for us to break out for 10 minutes in our teams to look at what you each have done to model or draw a process chart for your bank case. What you'd like to do is have you consolidate, come up with one for all of you in your team, just one for the whole team, and prepare to share it with another team. And when you're ready to share it, you can let us know. But we're thinking we'll give you like about 10 minutes to work on your own, and then 15 minutes with another team, and decide what we have sorted out who should present and who should receive. So forget this bullet. The presenting teams will be CompuSearch, FI, and Signature Company, and the receiving teams will be through CETA and Rise and Star Construction. And if you get all the way through and have additional time and want to reverse roles, you can, but start out this way. And the presenting teams should make it clear, like Jada did at the very beginning when she solicited your input. Do something like that. Make sure it's clear to the others that you want their input and feedback, so they feel free to share. And then revise what you have come up with based on what you hear. Again, this is practice for when we get feedback on your own case and factor it in. And we want to get good at that within your team, across teams, with us, and with outside executives. Receiving teams, oh, I have to make Joyce host. Let me do that real quick. Sorry. Where are you? Here you are. Make host. Yes. Receiving teams. Look, when you're listening to someone present to you, the tendency is to get a little bit lazy, let them talk, and say, yeah, whatever you just said is fine. What we want you to do is be a little bit more assertive, even aggressive in your listening. Ask questions, seek to understand what they're saying, draw them out, develop a point of view, and then lean in and share what you come up with. So it's a three-step process. Listen carefully, ask questions to draw out, develop a point of view, lean in and share what you have to contribute. And it should generally fall into three categories. What do you find particularly good about it, what you're seeing? What do you find interesting that you didn't expect? What do you see that could be improved? Notice it doesn't say bad. It's not that you're pointing out positive and negative. It's positive and could be better. And by lean in, what I mean is it sometimes feels a little bit uncomfortable to share because you're afraid that you might be offending somebody or looking smart or whatever. So lean into that discomfort and do it constructively. Number two is to don't lean in and share too soon. First, listen, ask questions to draw out, think, develop a point of view, think critically, develop a point of view, then lean in. So it's, rather than making suggestions right out of the box, right out of the gate, what you want to do is go through a three-step process and culminate with that. And what we'll do is we'll call everybody back in 25 minutes and have a few minutes for report out on how it went in the larger group. Okay? Joyce, are you able to?
Yeah, just I just want to be clear. Should I put CompuSearch and through separate first, right? And
Yes. Yeah, you'll be separate.
Angela's by herself from SATA and Jadra's by herself from RISE, so I'm just putting them all together.
Right.
So we basically have 4 groups. Okay, and then we'll move Gina,
Yeah,
Jamie,
we're actually
Peggy.
we're running a little bit behind, so why don't we make it just 5 minutes to work together on a single one, and then we'll break out and go to the group. So 5 minutes.
Okay, well, Phi and SATA and they'll all be together because there's only one person from the second group.
Right.
And then I'll just, 5 minutes, I'll move Gina, Jamin, Peggy into the CompuSearch. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'll open all the rooms. I didn't assign you, Peter.
Right.
Okay, you're unassigned.
Right.
Okay. So I've got Beth,